Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are taking a really deep dive into the microscopic world of hair restoration science. Look, hair loss impacts millions of us, and while treatments have evolved at just lightning speed, today we aren't just looking at the surface. No, we're zooming way in to decode the actual cellular conversations happening right beneath your scalp. Let's get right into it.
If you walk into almost any dermatology clinic today that treats hair loss, sooner or later you're going to hear the exact same three letters. PRP, platelet-rich plasma. It's literally everywhere. It's become one of the most widely used, totally physician-accepted regenerative approaches out there, and honestly, it's popular for a really good reason. It fundamentally makes biological sense. But despite its massive popularity, there's a bit of an elephant in the room, and both clinicians and patients know all about it.
And that brings us to the central mystery we're tackling today. Think about it. If PRP is scientifically proven to stimulate hair growth, why on earth are the results so incredibly inconsistent? It is a deeply, deeply frustrating reality for so many patients. I mean, you might have one person who sees phenomenal, absolutely life-changing results, and then another person goes to the exact same clinic, gets the exact same treatment, and sees barely any change at all. So why does that happen?
Well, to solve that mystery, we kind of have to rethink what platelets actually do. See, for the longest time, we just thought of platelets as clot cells. You know, the little guys that stop you from bleeding when you scrape your knee. But that's only a tiny fraction of their job. The really elegant biological premise of PRP is that platelets are actually these tiny, densely packed packets of signaling molecules. When they're activated, they release growth factors and cytokines. Think of them as chemical text messages that influence tissue repair, balance out inflammation, and literally change how cells behave. And this is crucial, right? Because your hair follicle isn't just some dead strand of keratin. Beneath the skin, it's a living, breathing, mini organ that's constantly responding to the chemical neighborhood around it.
Now, you probably already know the basics of the hair cycle. We've got anagen for growth, catagen for shrinking, and telogen for resting. The true goal of PRP isn't actually to magically sprout brand new follicles overnight out of nowhere. It's really to biohack that existing cycle. We want to keep your existing follicles in that active anagen growth phase for much longer and seriously delay that catagen regression. When we look under the hood at the specific biological pathways these platelets are targeting, a really fascinating picture emerges. These signaling molecules intersect with some critical cellular networks. Take the PI3K-AKT pathway, for instance. This is essentially the cell's survival signal. It creates what we call an anti-apoptotic tone, which is just a fancy way of saying it tells the cells, hey, stay alive, don't die off. Then we have the RKRK pathway, and that one drives proliferation and cell division. And then, super importantly, the angiogenic cascades, supported by factors like VEGF, which boost microcirculation. Since hair follicles are incredibly energy-demanding little mini organs, they absolutely need a robust blood supply to thrive. So PRP is basically attempting to deliver signals that activate all of these growth-friendly ecosystems all at once. Okay, so on paper, that biological logic is perfectly sound. It makes sense. So why the inconsistency? Well, let's pivot from the ideal biology to the stark, practical reality. The fundamental truth here is that PRP is not one standardized product. Unlike a pill manufactured in some highly controlled pharmaceutical lab where every single dose is exactly identical, PRP is a dynamic preparation. It's entirely influenced by the ever-changing biology of the specific human sitting in the chair, combined with the specific technique of the clinician preparing it. Let's walk through exactly how many variables are actually at play here. It's honestly like trying to bake a cake where the ingredients and the oven just change every single time you bake it. First, you have the input. Patient biology is highly dynamic. Your platelet count, your stress hormones, hydration, inflammatory mediators, all of that can shift dramatically from week to week. Second, the process. Clinics use totally different centrifuge speeds, different times, and they collect different fractions of the blood. That means the cellular makeup of the PRP changes. Third is activation. How and when those platelets are triggered to release their signals really varies. Some use calcium, some just rely on natural tissue activation. And finally, delivery. The injection depth, the spacing, the actual technique. Any slight change in this four-step recipe means the final message delivered to your follicle can range from highly growth supportive to just a jumbled, confusing mess. And this brilliantly illustrates the deepest root of the whole problem. Because platelets carry such a vast array of signals, a single PRP injection isn't just delivering a pure, simple grow command. It actually contains a fierce biological tug of war.
The preparation contains both accelerators, those are the pro-growth signals we desperately want, and brakes, inhibitory stop cues that just naturally exist in your blood. So the exact same session is sending conflicting commands to the follicle at the exact same time. Let's look at the gas pedal first. These are the accelerators pushing the follicle toward healthy growth. You have PDGF, which is fantastic for dermal signaling and supporting the tissue right around the hair. You have IGF-1, which directly links to those survival pathways we talked about earlier, keeping the cell alive. There's VEGF, providing that absolutely crucial microvascular support to keep the blood flowing, and HGF, which provides broad regenerative signaling. When these accelerators are loud and clear, they are pushing those ERK/MAPK and PI3K-AKT pathways into overdrive to really support a healthy, growing follicle. But remember, we also have the brakes. Platelets naturally store inhibitors too. For example, TGF-beta is a major signal that pushes the follicle right toward that regression, or catagen phase. You also have factors like PF4 and thrombospondin-1, which are anti-angiogenic. That means they actively counter the vascular support signals we just typed up. Add to that the practical reality of inflammatory noise. If the prep has a lot of white blood cells, or leukocytes, it can introduce inflammatory cytokines like IL-1 beta and TNF-alpha. All of this just creates static. It heavily dilutes the pro-growth message. And this mixed messaging, that is the exact reason why one patient might see explosive growth while another sees absolutely nothing.
So this brings us to a massively exciting, really forward-looking solution. If the core problem is mixed messaging, the logical next step in biological engineering is simply to refine the message. Enter a totally new conceptual approach, precision re-engineered efficacy optimization. Now, this approach doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It fully acknowledges that the foundational idea behind PRP, using platelet-driven communication to heal the follicle, is brilliant. But it seeks to take that raw, kind of chaotic biological soup and engineer it into a precise, highly targeted treatment.
So, how does this optimization actually work in practice? Well, it follows 4 really clear guiding principles. First, the composition must be well-defined, not just left up to the total chance of whatever your blood happens to look like that Tuesday. Second, it optimizes the exact concentration and ratio of molecules. Third, and honestly perhaps most importantly, it intentionally weights the preparation heavily toward those stimulatory cues, the accelerators. And fourth, it actively de-emphasizes the key inhibitory cues. It specifically lowers the contribution of mediators like TGF-beta that push the hair into regression. Basically, it's purposefully turning down the volume on the brakes and cranking up the volume on the gas. We really have to remember that hair growth regulation is network biology. There is absolutely no single magic switch you can just flip to turn hair on. Simply throwing a massive, chaotic amount of growth factors at the scalp just isn't the answer. A more precise, refined approach delivers a clear, beautifully orchestrated message. Think of it like a symphony. You don't want all the instruments playing as loud as they possibly can at random, right? You want the right notes playing at exactly the right time. It is all about orchestration, not biological overload.
Now, why does all this microscopic science actually matter to you, the patient sitting in the chair? Well, it translates to 3 massive, very practical clinical benefits. First, consistency. You're no longer entirely dependent on the random day-to-day fluctuations of your own blood biology. Second, predictability. Clinicians can use much clearer dosing logic, and that leads to far more uniform, reliable experiences across totally different patients. And third, interpretability. When the input is actually stable and reproducible, doctors can properly study the outcomes because they know exactly what they put into the scalp in the first place.
Listen, if you take away only one thing from our explainer today, let it be this. PRP remains one of the most widely used regenerative tools because its core biological concept is incredibly strong. The limitation of PRP was honestly never the idea itself. The limitation was always the variability. The path forward for hair restoration isn't abandoning this incredible biology, it's refining it. It's all about stripping away that inhibitory static so the follicle finally gets a clear, unconfused mandate to grow.
As we look to the future of personalized medicine, the goal just isn't to overwhelm the body with more signals. As the source material so perfectly puts it, the future is not louder biology, but better engineered biology. We are truly entering an era where we can actively curate the cellular conversations happening right in our own tissues. And honestly, I think that is absolutely fascinating. It really makes you wonder, what other areas of medicine could be completely revolutionized just by clearing up the biological noise? Think about it. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.